Well, hi everyone, and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. And today we've got some Van Halen news. As people who've listened to this new channel probably know, I'm a big Van Halen fan. And new material is out. Well, yes and no. So let me give you the background as to what is new, because everything that's new is old, and everything that's old is new. So, during Van Halen's stint on the Monsters of Rock tour, which Sammy in particular wasn't really happy about, they did a huge show in Dallas, but Sammy's voice was shot. He had laryngitis. He powered through the show, but as a professional who always wants to give it his all, he wasn't happy. He let the audience know and he said, "Don't you guys worry. We'll be back in Dallas, and next time the show is free." Well, that free show did happen. Unlike some bands that don't keep their promises, Sammy and the rest of the guys did. And Van Halen played a live outdoor show in the middle of downtown Dallas. And the show was videotaped and recorded professionally, and it's been circulating around in bootleg form pretty much since the 90s. It's on YouTube in pretty low quality, but you can still enjoy it. The performance is great, but now they're releasing a nice cleaned up version. They've upscaled the video. The audio sounds great. And it's coming out in July of this year as part of a unlawful carnal knowledge deluxe box, if you will. But the only real thing that's new is the video, because obviously the album was remastered last year by Bernie Grunman. So obviously you'll have both the vinyl and CD versions in there, a few unreleased tracks, some unreleased versions of Right Now, which should be interesting. But obviously, the live Dallas concert is the main feature. Now, as someone who's seen the concert many times in bootleg form, I can tell you that it really does capture Van Halen at their best. Because one thing that's really interesting about Van Halen when they're kicking on all eight cylinders playing live is that it's the perfect balance, pardon the pun, the perfect mix of professionalism and not giving a fuck. That's one thing that Van Halen really has. The professionalism comes from the fact that all of the musicians and singer in Van Halen are people that know their stuff. Eddie Van Halen, you don't need to say anything. Virtuoso, virtuoso, virtuoso. He's so good. I said it three times. Alex Van Halen, underrated because of his brother, but an amazing drummer. He should have never been slept on. But when your brother's Eddie Van Halen, and they were cool that they loved each other and all that. Michael Anthony is so solid, so talented, yet so tasteful. And that's before we get to talk about his essential backing vocals. And Sammy Hagar, always the consummate professional, always. So much so that when he felt he let an audience down, he said, "I'm going to come back to your town for free." That's just the kind of guy he is. And then there's the don't give a fuck side of it, which is really that Van Halen had a lot of fun on stage. Apart from the 2004 tour and some of the final tours with Wolfgang and Roth, when they were going between 74 and 95, they had fun on stage. You could hear it, you could see it, you could feel it. Eddie with his big smile, Alex just wailing back there, Michael Anthony and Sammy Hagar, who made in bonded instantly and are still friends and still touring together, playing Van Halen music to this day. And that fun attitude really rubbed up on the audience. And when you let people in a warm December Dallas day just get drunk and dance around and have fun, it's going to be a party. And that really was a party-like atmosphere. Now, this raises several other questions about the Van Halen back catalog. Obviously, everything that they recorded in terms of studio albums has now been remastered. Bernie Grunman just did the Hagar stuff in 2015. Chris Bellman did all of the Roth stuff. And the Roth stuff is actually getting a second audiophile remastering from Mobile Fidelity. It's being released at a snail's pace. The first album's out. Heaven knows when the second will be. But there you go. And this begs several questions. We all know that Eddie had a huge vault of material that was unreleased. Much of it apparently wasn't very well cataloged or organized. But At the same time, Eddie in his lifetime said that all of the good stuff is out there, and others around Van Halen have essentially implied, Wolf, I think, implied this, that basically Eddie knew what he wanted to put out there, and he didn't want to put out crap or outtakes or subpar material. So he was pretty strict about that. And I think that the very small number of sort of outtakes and alternative versions that we'll get on this box set are actually respectful and deferential to Eddie's wishes. Alex is obviously still very much in charge of things, and he and his brother were like that. So I think that's all very appropriate. Um, Even the mastering choices. Eddie was apparently not only very concerned about how the mix sounded, which explains why, like so many other albums, the Van Halen re releases were not remixes, just remasters, because Eddie had the balance right. And why should someone without his input mess about with that? Total respect for that. Not, and the original mixes were generally pretty good anyway on all of the albums. Some were great, none of them were bad. In terms of the mastering, Chris Bellman and Eddie collaborated for his 2015 remasters because Eddie was obviously very much alive then. And he told Chris exactly how he wanted it to sound. Chris went away, said, well, I could turn the bass up a bit, which is a lot of complaints about Van Halen mastering is that the bass could be boosted. But Eddie said, no, no, no. We don't need the bass boosted. So Bellman, who had actually done some examples for Eddie with the bass up, Eddie goes, nah, do it the other way. And Chris said, okay. And he did it. Eddie loved it. And so we can say that to the 2015, Chris Bellman, wonderful audio engineer, mastering engineer. His remasters are the authentic version because Eddie had his input. Sadly, Eddie died before we saw the release of the Hagar era stuff remastered, but Bernie Grundman was really tasteful and didn't try to do a revisionist remastering. He just really created better versions of the original mastering using the better digital to analog converters and cutting the records with lots of tender loving care for the vinyl purists out there. Now, one thing that's raised by this is what about the stuff that was released in terms of video material that hasn't had an updated release since the internet age, really? I'm talking about Live Without a Net, filmed on 35 millimeter film from the 5150 tour. That could be done in 4K, would look great because it's 35 millimeter film. Will we get a 5150 deluxe box set that comes with a 4K or at least HD version of Live Without a Net? I hope so. Then there's a professionally videoed 1989 concert from the OU 812 tour that is a great set list. Band really, really performing at their peak. Will we get that in an upscaled video form on a OU 812 deluxe box set? And that raises the question, why didn't we get, because this was also filmed in 35 millimeter, a 4K or at least an HD version of the Live Right Here, Right Now video? We're getting this video of the Dallas concert, but not the much more elaborate Right Here, Right Now video. They remastered the vinyl version of the album for the first time, actually, on vinyl just a year or so ago. But what happened to that video? Well, I've got some theories. And the theories revolve around distaste for the video. Now, the album itself is controversial because it wasn't fully live. They obviously recorded it all live, but then Eddie said, oh, I'm out of tune, and Alex said, oh, I'm dragging. So the brothers re-recorded most of their parts at the 5150 studio after the tour had finished, and they forced Sammy, I think, away from either a honeymoon or a vacation, one or the other, to come and redo his vocals, which pissed him off because it ruined his time, but it also pissed him off because he wanted it to be an authentic live album, and it isn't. And you have to remember that at this time in the music industry, greed was king. So if someone went up to a record executive and said, I've got a great idea, let's release a live album, but it's not really live. And the executive would say, Hell yeah, that was the 90s in the music industry. And so while everything sounds good, and while I mean it's every Eddie's playing and Alex is playing and Sammy's playing, but it isn't all live together. And the video was like that too. They filmed it over 2 nights, and Sammy is wearing different clothes on both nights. Normally that would be okay because okay, let's say that pound cake is from night number one, and why can't this be love is from night number two? But and with the sound, though, the basic soundtrack, it was like that. But with the actual film, it changes every other edit. So Sammy could be beginning the song wearing one piece of clothing, and then there's an edit cut. And then 2 seconds later, he's changed his clothes. Well, that's because they're editing it together, which means the video isn't live either. They're just syncing it up the best they can. It would still be nice to have a 4K version of it. It would be even better if they released both show one and show two unedited in their entirety. And this is, of course, assuming that they have all of the film from all of the cameras, or at least most of the cameras that they used. And I'm pretty certain they would have the multi-track audio for both nights. They decided not to do that. I wonder why. I think most fans would have even been happy with a 4K version of the original film with all of its weird edits and the fact that it wasn't really live. But why not spend the extra effort to give us both the Dallas concert, which they're doing, but why not the full unedited right here, right now? Maybe it's because the original film canisters are lost, the reels from the multi camera shoot over the 2 nights. Who knows what the reason is? Maybe the concert just is considered ugh because they didn't like what the decisions that were made in post production. I don't know. It would have been nice. I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing that out. So we're finally going to see the Dallas show in living color. You can throw away your bootlegs, I guess, and enjoy the new one. And in a few months, we're going to see Sammy and Mikey on tour celebrating the life and legacy of Eddie Van Halen. Like, subscribe. We will see you next time. Take care.